I want to talk about some COVID updates real quick and some stuff because there's been news with COVID stuff. I don't know what we're going to call this clip because on YouTube we're going to have to call it something else because at any time you mention COVID, they brand it. So even though this is about COVID, it's more about the stuff around it. It's not necessarily about COVID. So the big news this week was the Washington Capitals got fined $100,000 for breaking COVID protocols.
It kind of surprised me.
The statement the NHL put out was super vague, and I have these notes in order of how things happen, so it kind of gives you the timeline. So they released a statement on Wednesday. It said National Hockey League announced today it has fined the Washington Capitals $100,000 for player violations of the league's COVID-19 protocols, which involve social interactions among the team members who were in close contact and who were not wearing face coverings, which ended up being a bunch of Russian players in a hotel together in the same hotel room. So the Washington Capitals then put out a statement saying that the training staff has worked extremely hard to create a safe environment for all of the players to be able to complete this season. We are disappointed by our players' choice to interact in their hotel room and outside team approved areas. So again, just kind of, this is what happened. There was players, and then Elliot Friedman went on Twitter and he basically said it was Kuznetsov, Orlov, Ovechkin, and Samsonov were the four players that were in the room, and that's what's going on. And now they're on a 4-game quarantine because they tested positive for COVID. And then Ovechkin put a statement out saying that, he regretted his spending time with his teammates in a room, basically. Like, I'll do better in the future.
Did you say they did test positive for COVID?
I think they did test positive, did they not? I'm almost positive. Yeah, so they're going to miss 4 games or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but no, I think they did test positive.
Oh,
if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that's what I read.
Regardless, you broke the rules at their the NHL would have just pounded the rules home to these teams and players. I
want to ask you something. This isn't in my notes. Do you think the rules are a little bit foolish? Did you read the statement that Ovechkin's wife put out?
I did not, no.
Okay, so she put out a statement. I don't have it in my notes, but I'm going to paraphrase it. That basically said, so the 4 Russian players on the team hang out in a room and bad news, you're going to spread COVID to everybody, but sitting next to the bench, next to your teammates, hugging each other after a goal, being in the locker room together, those are all fine. You can't get COVID that way. But the only way to get COVID is to be in a hotel room with the same people you're doing all that stuff with. It's basically what she said. Yeah,
I agree and disagree with her at the same time. I think it is a bit silly that you can't, you spend 3 hours together basically touching cheeks during a game, and you can't hang out in a hotel room. You'd be distanced more in a hotel room than you would playing hockey together. You're
literally touching shoulders on and like someone scores a goal, like you're running down the bench, you're hugging on the ice, like she's got points. And she's also kind of just overreacting because obviously it's her husband too, and she thinks they're picking on the Russian players.
Yeah, which is foolish. I think that's just silly.
Some other news was Carolina's games got postponed. 5 players put on COVID-19 protocol. And that's funny because those games were against Florida, who also missed another 2 games against Dallas. So Florida's only played 2 games this season. They've had 4 games postponed when no one on their team has tested positive.
Yeah. Poor Florida.
So they've played 2 games, Florida, in 13 games. Or 13 days. So the 13 days that the season has started, Florida's only played twice, which means they have to play the remaining 54 games over the next 103 days, which is less than every other day.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think that's like them getting more rest and maybe more practice is a good thing long term?
I think it's bad because they're getting the rest now. If somehow the gap was later, then that would be a good thing because they're able to rest. Their schedule is going to be way harder now, and it's not any fault of their own. Like if a team breaks, say this was Washington, and Washington had this thing happen where they weren't being responsible and they had to miss 4 games, and then that was going to cause their schedule to be condensed and a little bit harder. That's on them for being stupid and not following the rules. Florida didn't do anything wrong here.
Yeah, exactly.
They're paying for other people's problems, and I just think that's really unfortunate. So I felt like saying that. Like,
it is. Just taking a step back real quick. This conversation is absolutely ridiculous. Think about where we are right now. We're not even talking about hockey.
Yeah,
we're talking about medical stuff that's preventing teams to play. If I guess I can't even say a year ago because this is kind of when COVID started, but a year and a half ago. Can you imagine talking about this? Like, what the hell's going on? Like, This is crazy.
Yep. I want to ask you about the Nashville Carolina game. This is something that I thought of. So Carolina played Nashville on Monday, I believe. And then they played them on Tuesday, or the Tuesday game was canceled because of some testing.
Right.
People were showing symptoms or whatever. How come Nashville wasn't quarantined when they just played them the day before? Like physical contact, play, they're, you could easily spread it to the other team.
If they were, if Nashville was infected, they might not test positive for a couple of days later.
That's right.
So I think you're right. Why weren't they?
I don't know. I'm just wondering,
quarantined a little bit,
because they said the game on Tuesday was canceled because of an abundance of caution to ensure the health and safety of the players. But
unless it happened after the game or something.
But I don't know how it could have happened after the game, unless there should have been fines or something given. If it happened after the game, that means someone broke protocol somewhere and went somewhere where they got it, which they aren't allowed to do, right?
Yeah. Maybe it was a hotel situation where an NHL representative had it or something like that, and it was in the same area.
I don't know. But if they didn't know specifically when or how the tracing happened of how those players got it, then I just don't see how literally the team from the game they played before was not observed at all. Like, just maybe you guys should have a game pushed back just to make sure nobody tests positive, because you can be asymptomatic and show, false positives for a couple days, and then the real results start coming through. So I thought it was kind of weird that we're slapping Carolina. They've had a couple players test, even though the day before they just played a team, and we're not going to address that. I think this is just the NHL wanting to try to push everything through and get everything. I mean, they don't want to push the schedule back, and they don't want the games to be like Florida situation where you have so many in a row where I don't know what it's just. I don't know. That's too many back-to-backs, no multiple days off in between, no week-long break like you used to get. Like, players are going to be pretty worn out and tired when this season is getting near the end. That's what I think.
Yeah, and it has a kind of a playoff feel to it. Like, Montreal just played Vancouver 3 times in a row. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's going to get exhausting, even from a viewer's perspective, watching your team play the same team 2 or 3 times, going somewhere else, and maybe coming back, playing that team again. So it's kind of cool in a way, but it's also frustrating at the same time. So yeah,
it's kind of like a mini series almost. It's like a baseball schedule or like it's a mini playoff or a mini. Yeah. So anyway, the players who were put on the COVID-19 protocol for Carolina were Fogle, Martinuk, Jordan Stahl, Teravainen, and Slavin. And while they're on protocol, or while those games are being postponed, they're not allowed to practice in their facility either. So the Carolina operations are completely shut down. Their last game that they should have played last night on Saturday would have been the last one, so they're good to go now. But I don't know. It's just how many more of these do you think we're going to see where we go a couple games with a team not being able to play, and then eventually everything's just getting so backloaded that they're going to have to come up with something because there's just too many games to play at the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm also curious to see. I mean, that's a good point, and I'm also curious to see what the contrast is between the United States teams and the Canadian teams. The playoffs happened in Canada last year because there was more rules and regulations around COVID, and they were more strict. Made sense. And so far, we've had Dallas, Carolina, Washington potentially. So, are we going to go this entire year and only see American teams go through this kind of thing, and further prove that the COVID situation, rules-wise, is being better followed in Canada? Or are we going to see a Canadian team break the rules? I'm thinking that we will. Not necessarily break the rules, but be in a situation where there's a COVID situation. I think we will see a Canadian team go through the same thing. And obviously there are more American teams than there are Canadian teams, but still, it's going to be something to keep an eye on and think about, I guess, a little bit.